Let me introduce Steve Fagin. Thank you so much for coming, first of all. Steve is an award-winning columnist that has published in The Day. I'm not reading it correctly. He writes the Great Outdoors column and is published by The Day newspaper in New London, Connecticut. He's the author of the book Treasures of Southeastern Connecticut and a book review editor of Appalachia, the Journal of the Appalachian Mountain. His articles also have been featured in the New York Times and Runner's World. Steve has scaled all 67 New England 4,000 footers with his son Tom and climbed in the Himalayas, Andes, and Alps. He lives in Ledyard, Connecticut with his wife Lisa. So, welcome Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Millie. It's always a pleasure coming here to any library, but especially I think Stonington is really it's a wonderful institution. And congratulations on having this wonderful service for everyone to enjoy. Before I get started, let me just tell a little story about, and Tom will probably recognize some of this. When we were hiking the North-South Trail, the Rhode Island North-South Trail, anybody know that at all? Okay, it's a 78-mile long footpath that goes from the Massachusetts border all the way to Blue Shutters Beach in Charlestown, where we did it in stages. And in doing it in stages, what we would do, we would leave one car at one end and then shuttle the car and so forth. So one of our longer stages, it was like 10 or 15 miles or so. We got all the way. There were three of us on this particular leg of it. It was Maggie Jones and Phil Pluff. Anyway, the three of us got to close to the end of this long day's hike, and Maggie says, "Oh boy, I can't wait to get back into your car so we can ride back." And I stopped for a second. I said, "My car? You mean your car?" And then her jaw kind of dropped, and we realized that her car was there, but her keys were back in my car at the head of the trail, like 10 or 15 miles away.
Oh, God.
So we stood there and scratched our heads and said, "Oh, now what do we do?" And but just by coincidence, there was a woman not far away that was raking leaves in her yard or something like that. And she looked at us and said, "Hey, what are you bums doing, enjoying yourself? Here I am slaving away." I said, "Ma'am, this is your lucky day." I said, "If you give me a ride back to my car, my friends here will finish raking your lawn." And so that's the way it worked out. And that was sort of a familiar way that we sort of navigated. We often, anybody who has hiked on the Appalachian Trail are familiar with the term trail magic, where you find people who leave food or drinks or help you out along the way. But we relied on different forms of trail magic oftentimes when we took the wrong trail or something, which leads me to the point of why would someone who has a propensity for getting lost or straying occasionally wind up having to write a trail guide? So it was kind of a steep learning curve when they got in touch with me and asked me if I was interested in doing this update for the Appalachian Mountain Club. And I said, sure. And then I realized what I was getting into, because it's very exacting. If you're doing a guide, you just can't say, "Oh, just go to this place and follow the trails." So it was very, very exacting. I said you got to keep track of the GPS coordinates, the elevation gain, exact distances, 1.2 miles, take a left on this trail, and so forth. So it was kind of an interesting experience to learn how to do all of that. But I still maintain that in my approach to hiking, and what I try to convey to other people who might be interested in reading the guide, I said it is a guide, it's not a mandate. And so if you're following a guide and if you see a trail that looks kind of intriguing, don't worry about the guide. Put it down and follow your instincts, and that way you leave yourself open to adventure and surprise. Some of the surprises are good, sometimes not so good. But anyway, I like maintaining that sort of spirit of approaching, looking at hikes as kind of an adventure. So with that said, let's start. This is kind of divided into two parts. First part is because I do hiking as well as kayaking. So we'll deal with the hiking things first. Then I'll show a short video, and then we'll go into the paddling aspects. So hit the trail. Anybody familiar with the Chauncey Peak that's in Meriden? You've been up there? It's a wonderful trail. And it's what's interesting about this, so it's right on the Metacomet Ridge, which is they call the spine of Connecticut, this Trap Rock Ridge that runs from Long Island Sound all the way through Connecticut, central Connecticut into Massachusetts and beyond. And what's interesting about this particular peak is if you're right where we're seeing here, looking west towards New Haven, and you can see Sleeping Giant and so forth. If you walked 50 feet in the other direction, you'd come to this enormous quarry, an active quarry. And it sort of reinforces the notion of the need for land preservation. And it's to the credit of the Connecticut Forest and Park Association and other organizations that Avalonia and so forth that really go out of their way to preserve land. So, and the Connecticut Forest and Park Association also maintains 825 miles of Blue Blaze trails. If you hike in anywhere in Connecticut, you're probably familiar with some of the Blue Blazes, and you'll see them, and that's the Connecticut Forest. And that's a wonderful organization. They maintain these trails, they maintain the rights of way, and so forth. So it's a fabulous organization, and that's part of my mission also in writing my column and also in writing this book, is to pay tribute to all the organizations that really, people kind of tend to take nature preserves and parks for granted. They think, oh, the government or somebody put it here and it's always been here and so forth. But really the reality is that so many of these are there because of the generosity, the hard work, and the vision of so many people for generations that preserve these properties. So I'd like to give a little shout out to all those organizations and individuals who work and donate money to set aside land for future generations.
You met a comment with King Philip.
King Philip, that's right. This is our friend Marco. That's a familiar pose he always does. That's on top of, I'm assuming that a lot of people have been into Patchogue. It's a wonderful, there's 27,000 acres. It's the largest state forest in Connecticut. And the Narragansett Trail that cuts through there. It's a fabulous place. And this is Mount Misery. And that's a relatively easy hike. You can combine it with other paths and so forth, but it's a worthwhile thing. And that's in the book. There's a description of that in the book as well. How many people? I assume most of you have been out to Block Island, but have you hiked on any of the trails out there? Yeah. No. Well, it's incredible. The Block Island, I think more than half the island, is set aside as nature preserve, and they have a very active community there that supports land preservation, and not just preservation, but making it available for public use. And this is on the Clayhead Trail, and well, the way we did it as a day trip. We took the ferry from Port Judith out to Block, and arranged to have a taxi pick us up and drop us off at the trailhead. And then I called her when we were a few minutes from the end of the trail. She picked us up and drove us to the next one. Otherwise, you can do it by bikes, but then you still got to go back and forth. So if you want to cover a lot of ground, the best way, I think, is to do it by taxi or something. This is another trail that's on, this is in the area of Rodman's Hollow. And that gets kind of confusing. You can get twisted around there. But we just took this straight path that goes right down from the road down to the water. It's wonderful. It's like being in another, it's like being in Lord of the Rings in the Shire or something. It's just a wonderful, pristine, quiet place. Have people here hiked on the cliff walk? Have you done the whole thing all the way to Bailey's Beach? No, okay, yeah. So yeah, the first part of it near Easton's Beach is it's nice and paved. It's a wide path and smooth and flat. But as you work your way farther towards Bailey's Beach, it's only about 3.5 miles from Easton Beach to Bailey's Beach. But when you get closer to the end, it gets really rugged. So if you do it, bring trekking poles or good boots, because it gets the land, big jumbled rocks and so forth. But it's great. So, I mean, the mansions are great and everything, but it's also nice to look out at the ocean. This is the White Memorial Foundation, which is in Western Connecticut, in Litchfield. And this is another example of what I was saying earlier about organizations and families in this case that owned a big estate, and when the parents were getting older and they no longer can afford or have the ability to maintain it and so forth, and the heirs weren't interested in keeping it, they donated it to and created a nature conservancy, and it's open to the public. It's a wonderful place, and there's so many. This model is sort of replicated throughout New England. It's great. How about Chatfield Hollow? People been there? That's in Killingworth, and there's great trails. There's easy ones, but it's an incredible assortment of jumbled rocks everywhere. And this particular formation is called Fat Man Squeeze. And my friend Carl Astor is not fat, but he did have to squeeze to get through there. We all squeezed through there. There is a side trail off to the side, but it's kind of fun to cut through.
Oh, wow.
How about Bear Cave? This is interesting. This is right on the Narragansett Trail in North Stonington and near Lake Wyasset. And the Narragansett Trail goes all the way from Lantern Hill to Asheville Pond in Hopkinton, Rhode Island. And so this is about midway along the way, and people can walk right by that and not even realize the cave is there, because there's two entrances, but they're both on the ground, and you can walk by it. People often pass by it without even noticing it there. And it's a good-sized cavern, not quite as big as this room, but almost as big. You can fit about 20 people in there, and you can crawl back if you bring a headlamp and so forth. It's a talus cave, by the way, which is formed by tumbling rocks rather than limestone, which is water dripping and limestone. People have been on top of Lantern Hill. I think some people
Yes.
mentioned that you hiked Lantern Hill. I don't recall, have you done the spring hike at all?
The spring hike.
Yes. It's so mark this on your calendar. It was just a few weeks ago, on the vernal equinox. The first day of spring, the first sunrise of spring, you can hike up. You have to leave early, wear a headlamp, about 6:30 in the morning to get there, where the first rays of sun come up over the hills and to the east. And the westerly Morris dancers come and perform there, and they sing and dance. I don't know about sing. They have accompaniment music and do a nice, colorful dance. It's a nice tradition. They've been doing it for almost 40 years.
Wow.
We didn't get much snow this winter, but I managed to get up there this is just a month or two ago, we had that one storm. And Lantern Hill is an interesting place. It's 491 feet, so it's the tallest promontory around. And when I first moved to the area, I lived not far from Lantern Hill, I got used to the sound of a little siren would go off every few hours, and then this huge explosion. And because it was owned by Ottawa Silica, a quarry mining operation, and they did that for 100 years or so, and the silica from there went into landscaping and paint and toothpaste and all sorts of other products. But when the tribe, it's also sacred to the Mashantucket Teapot tribal nation, and so when they got going with the casino, they purchased Lantern Hill, and now it's open for hikers. It always had been during the Ottawa Silver, but at least you don't hear the explosions now. But the quarry is still there, and they're not using it as a quarry. It was known as Sachem Seat because Sassacus, who had been the Sachem, used to, during the Pequot Indian War back in the, help me out here, Tom.
1636 or so.
1636, thereabouts. He would climb up there and look for any opposing enemies coming. So they call Lantern Hill Sachem Seat. This is a nice trail also. This is also in Patchogue. It's on the Narragansett Trail. And have you been to Green Falls Pond? There's a nice swimming area there and so forth, but that's accessible by the road to the north. But if you come in by a Sand Hill Road, which is off of Route 49, right over the North Stonington Allentown line. The Narragansett Trail crosses this road there and it follows this beautiful ravine. You think it's the forest primeval. It's so rough and rugged. In fact, the Connecticut Forest and Park Association built that bridge a couple of years ago. Otherwise, it was kind of tricky footing. But what's really striking about that, it looks so pristine, but if you look closely, you'll see old foundations and so forth. And it was an active mill, like so many other water sources in the area, that was heavily developed for mills and so forth. And nature has reclaimed it after the mills shut down. And I think that's heartening. People, when you see open space or a farm or something like that getting developed, you say, oh, there it goes, well, it's lost forever. But that's not always the case. So if you're patient and live long enough, you might get to see it, nature take it back. Watch Hill is, when I was hiking or just enjoying some of the seacoast along, I realized that the stretch from Watch Hill to Weekapaug is one of the longest strip of unbroken sand in our area at least. And so I thought that was a nice hike to hike from Watch Hill. That would be like right below Taylor Swift's house, and then keep going to the causeway. And I like going in any time of year, but it's nice going in winter. There's no bugs, no crowds. But if you go in summer, you can stop in Stonington, go for a swim, get an ice cream cone or whatever. Nappertree Point, you can go right from Watch Hill to Nappertree Point. And that's another great resource, great birding area. I'm sure some of you here are ornithologists, would-be ornithologists. And this time of year, I guess the spring migration is pretty much wrapping up, but if you stick around for the fall migration, it's huge, hawks and so forth.
There's been a lot of controversy about
Access.
Access. What's the situation now? Do you know?
You know, I'm sort of mystified. There's a controversy between the town council and the Watch Hill Fire District over access, and I haven't been able to figure it out. They keep one of them two keeps threatening to cut off, but that's not going to happen for anybody I've spoken to. I'm not sure what's really involved, but I wouldn't worry about it.
I agree.
This is also on the Narragansett Trail. You've been out to El Pond, Long Pond?
Yeah, that's great.
It's a wonderful section there. If you come in from North Road in Hopkinton, and then you immediately go into this corridor of rhododendron, and then it reaches the crest. I should reverse these slides because the next one shows Long Pond. But you get to the top and there's Long Pond, and then you descend into this incredible ravine. It's really one of the toughest little scrambles for a few hundred yards or so. But it's worth hiking to. It's a nice trail. This is the view from, it says El Pond. That's actually, I mislabeled it. That's Long Pond. On the other side of the trail is El Pond, which is a huge bog. It's one of the largest type of bogs anywhere in New England.
Have you ever swam in either one of them?
You're not supposed to. I think I did probably.
I think I did.
Yeah, I think most people, it's tempting.
My ability.
Yeah, but it would be a nice place for it, but I understand that all these places aren't designed for human amusement. You know, there's reasons why they try to, I think in this case, I think they didn't want it to be overrun with
But
swimmers.
it's not private.
No, the one end of it is private, but I think where it comes down to the water, I think it's public, but I think they just don't want to encourage people.
Yeah.
This is another example. This is Indian Council Caves in Barkhamsted, also in western Connecticut. And I'm sure people have noticed the moss grows. It's just incredible. It's part of the whole cycle. You know, when you have bare rocks, and then mosses form and lichen, and then sometimes a little crack, a seed will drop into a crack, and a tree will grow, and a rock will pull apart. So it's having Maggie Jones on a lot of the hikes. She's the former executive director of the Nature Center, and she's always very valuable to have along. She'll point out every single living thing. Patchogue, this is another example. There's probably 20 different types of ferns here. There's maidenhair fern, hay-scented ferns, and cinnamon ferns, and so forth. Barn Island, I'm sure most of you have been out there. It's sort of an interesting point about Barn Island is that sort of exercise or example of what not to do with nature initially. Because Stonington back in the 1930s, they were worried about malaria and mosquito infestations, and so they drained the swamps or the wetland areas. And that they have gotten rid of the mosquitoes, but it also got rid of all the shorebirds that used to come there. And so to correct that, then they built these impoundments. And those caused other tidal issues and so forth, so they had to make some more ramifications. So I think they finally got it settled down now in terms they're done with. I mean, it's always been a wonderful place, but it shows the futility of trying to control nature.
I was there 2 years ago, and it was full of mosquitoes.
Yeah, so I guess you take your pick. Yeah,
Wow.
A lot of places along the shore, the
Yeah,
mosquitoes, ticks, it's sort of an occupational hazard. If you,
I turned around, I couldn't take it.
yeah.
Do you know how it came up with the name Barn Island? The history of the name Barn?
There's actually Barn Island is actually a little island. This is a part of the peninsula. The island is actually a little bit south of the point, but I presume there was a barn there. That's your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, they farm the salt marsh.
Oh, okay. Was that part of the continental marshes then too? Whit Davis and so forth.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, Whit Davis he was on Osbert Point in Stonington, the Davis farm. And he passed away, but he took me on a tour of his place once. And he had deeds or records showing how Washington's troops came through, and he sold them marsh for his forces. I was mentioning this earlier about the Tri-Town Forest Preserve in North Stonington. It's also one of the many, I think there's like 4,000 acres that Apollonia Land Conservancy owns and controls. This is one of them, and it's a nice, if you do the whole loop, it's about a 5-mile hike. And it's challenging that you go up 2 mountains, Ricks Mountain and Lambert Mountain. So it's a good hike. But what's interesting thing about this is we went with Mark Starr, who's a North Stonington author, historian, and he took us to kind of emphasize the people used to think that every stone wall you came upon was of colonial origin, that they were built by farmers to clear land or mark their boundaries or contain animals. But there's growing realization that these were built long before the colonists arrived in the 17th century. These go back thousands of years. In some cases, the indigenous people populated the area long before the colonists arrived. And so this is one example, and you can see when you come to a wall sometime in the middle of the woods, and you say, why would someone build something here if there's no houses around, there's no animal pens or anything else? And so a lot of these were built for, rather than utilitarian, for more spiritual reasons. And there's one particular formation called the snake wall, or serpent wall, I'm sorry, that it is serpentine, and they all sort of pointed, they have like a diamond head wall, rock at the end, pointing to a water source or a fissure in the earth, and that's where the natives believed that the spiritual world inhabited. So Mark took us around and showed, he has a great book out also, you can take it out to the library or buy it. Bluff Point is, I'm sure, David, you just went out there for the first time not long ago. And it's a great spot. I'm sure most of you have been there. I have a nice personal connection there. Back in the 1970s, when I first moved to the area, the state was just acquiring the property, and they wanted to build a park there, and their concept, they hired an engineering firm to come up with a plan, and the plan called for turning it into basically a Coney Island with Ferris wheels and boardwalks and bathhouses and a huge access road that would go all the way from 95 down the middle of a point, and they were gonna pave in this salt pond, so that to fit 6,000 cars. So we had a plan, say, wait a minute, how about if we just sort of left it the way it is? And to our, not surprise, but we worked hard, we had hearings and so forth, a lot of people say, well, if you close off, how are people gonna get there? Well, you ever think about walking? You know, and so we prevailed, and the legislature passed back in 1975 the first still only coastal reserve in Connecticut.
Where town is this in?
Oh, this isn't in Groton, I'm sorry. It's very easily accessible, beautiful flat trails, they're wide, and they're accessible for people pushing strollers as well as horseback riders or bicycles.
Similar story in Rhode Island, the park in Charlestown was gonna be a nuclear power plant. And they fought it,
That's
tooth
right.
and nail to stop it.
The air base, the old air base.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
You mean-
when the air base closed,
Yeah.
a nuclear power plant was gonna buy the land.
Okay, that's coming up, you're talking about Charlestown?
Yes.
Yes,
The old-
that's the Trolley Town.
Right.
The trolls are.
The trolls are in the town park section,
Yeah.
and the hiking trails are in the National Refuge, Wildlife Refuge section, next door. Haley Farm is this is sort of like the birth of the environmental movement in the area, because this is another example of citizens rising up, and back in the 1960s, the military, the government was gonna build military housing there. This was an old farm, and Haley had been a fishmonger from New York, but he was kind of a colorful character, and he wanted to set up a gentleman's farm, and so he moved, bought the property, and actually did farming there, and but he also raced horses around the circuit there. And then, anyway, the state was going to build housing, and that's inspired all the locals to get involved, and they formed a committee to save Haley Farm, and the state says, okay, well, if you want to do that, you can buy it, but you'll have to pay for it. And so they held bake sales and rock concerts and car washes, and they raised the money, and they were able to save it. And that was one of the first examples of citizens rising up and working to preserve something for the future. And that saved the Haley Farm, became the Groton Open Space Association, which has done fabulous work, as well as Avalonia. Haley Farm is like so many of these places, a four-season spot. Hammonasset Beach, another very accessible. If you need to use a wheelchair or you just don't feel like hiking over or something, there's nice flat, smooth trails. And if you walk all the way out to the end, you might see seals at the end. Satchwist Point, I was just there last week, as a matter of fact. Has anyone been there? It's right near Newport.
Yeah, I was
And,
there this past winter.
Yeah, did you see the snowy owl?
No, we saw some harlequin,
Harlequin.
duck, and all other kinds of migratory birds. It was beautiful.
Yeah, the best time, well, if you're into birding, the best time is to go in winter.
Yep.
Because they have all the scoters and the harlequin ducks and the brants and
Balloons.
balloons and everything else. But it's good year round, and it's a nice, flat, easy, accessible 3-mile
Yeah.
path all the way around.
Steve,
What did you
Okay,
say?
good to see you, Tom, thank you.
great to see you.
Chapman Falls, yes,
I was curious, what month did you see the snowy owl?
I've never seen, I think the best time, it came any time in January, February, or something like that. But I asked when I was there just last week if it had been around, and they said they hadn't seen it, or they hadn't seen them. But they're around. I've seen a lot of them in Alaska, but never, and I saw one once, not far from our house once, in Connecticut. But they're a great sight. Devil's Hop Yard. Most people gravitate to Chapman Falls, and it's a wonderful, and there's trails that go right from there, but there's, right in Devil's Hop Yard State Park, there's miles and miles of other trails. Okay, let me switch gears here for a second, and I'll see if I can, we're gonna do the water interlude.
We're approaching the broken dam. You want to go first, Jan? All right. This river is one of the few Class A rivers. It's one of the cleanest rivers in the state. Get it? Okay, I guess I'm next. It's about 10 miles along its mouth is at the confluence of the Jeremy and Blackledge rivers in East Hampton, right near the Marlboro, across the border. And then it empties into the Connecticut River.
So you got it right in your face, huh?
Yeah. So everybody ready? You wanna go tomorrow with everybody?
Thank you for your patience, everyone.
So this is the completion of going through the dam. And this is another example of how nature has reclaimed. This was the right to the right, like where you'd be sitting, there was an old mill, old factory there. When it got turned down, now the Salmon River, as I said, is a Class A river, one of the cleanest, beautiful resources around. The Connecticut River, also, I've done it all the way from the Canadian border down to, let's say, about 400 miles. Back then, that was before the Clean Water Act was adopted in 1974. And before then, we saw not one eagle, not one great blue heron, no ospreys, no raptors anywhere, hawks. And after the Clean Water Act, and they also banned DDT. And that now, is, if you've gone on the Connecticut River anywhere, you'll just see tons and tons of raptors, hawks, and eagles. And now eagles, I'm sure you've seen them year round. They're around here, they're at Groton Reservoir, and we've seen them by Essex Lake and Long Pond where I live and so forth. But it's still a treat to see them. We usually do. We went a couple of weeks ago, towards kind of late in the season, around Hamburg Cove and Lyme. This is another thing that you should all mark down if none of you has done it. Has anyone seen the swallows? Okay, all right, so mark this down and make a, back in late August into September, there's a little island called Goose Island, which is in Lyme, and it's only a couple miles north, or just north of the Baldwin Bridge. It's on this side of the river. And you can if you don't have a kayak or canoe, they can rent them there, or there's also boat guides from the Eagle Landing. Anyway, there's a annual event called the Swallow Migration, and they are all following the bugs that fly south. And at sunset, every night, there's a new wave of them come, and sometimes 800,000 swallows all just fill the air, and they form this vortex, like this cyclonic motion. It's called a murmuration, and they swirl around. It's different every time. I've probably seen them 20 or 30 times. Each time it's different. Sometimes they all stay up, other times they swoop low, and it's great. The show lasts maybe 15 or 20 minutes. They do the same thing in the morning when they leave, but I went there once, like 5 in the morning. I didn't quite see them, so that's on my list of things I'm going to do it this year in the morning. You can camp on Calf Island, which is right next to Goose Island, so that's another thing that you might want to consider. I'm sure people have seen seals right off here in Stonington. They're increasingly popular or prevalent. The best time to see them is right about now, and then they'll start migrating north to the Gulf of Maine and points north. But we go several times a year. We kayak year round, wearing dry suits and so forth. But you want to, we leave from Esker Point, which is in Noank, and then paddle across, diagonally across Fisher's Island Sound. It's about 4 miles each way. And there's a point called Huggery Point, which is on the sort of the northeastern tip of Fisher's Island. And there's a big colony that migrates there. We're also right off, not far from here, off of Liddy Island. I've seen them as well. So you don't have to go all the way out to Fisher's Island. And if you go to Faulkner Island, which is off of Guilford, it's also about 4 miles out. There's a big colony of gray seals. These are harbor seals. They're smaller. The gray seals are the big ones. They're also called horsehead because they have kind of like an equine snout. But there's tons of them out there. Bluff Point, as I mentioned, is a great place. It's not just for hiking, but if you do decide to paddle there, on the Paquonic River, I would advocate going at high tide, and then you go, there's a little channel that runs between the river, the main river, and the shoreline of Bluff Point. And you can cut through there and it empties into that salt pond at the end. And it's very pristine and serene, as you can see. Alewife Cove, this is another example of, this is a nice sort of urban, yeah, you could say, I see your jaw drop, Alewife Cove. So you think of it as right next to Ocean Beach, and it is right next to Ocean Beach. And I was part of a film crew or TV crew that was putting on a program, and so I was escorting the host on this, and they had a drone and so forth. But he was standing, the drone operator was standing like right where the water slide is at Ocean Beach. So it's an example of, I mean, this looks like it's Bermuda or something, and it's one of those nice urban settings, and yet it's a very natural scene. Pawcatuck River is right here, of course. And just a few years ago, they finally knocked out the 5th dam that had been, and now they have fishways, or they opened it up, and so that now the alewife, the migratory fish that are anadromous fish that can swim in the salt water most of the year, and then they return to freshwater to breed. And the dams impeded them, and so when they finally got rid of that last dam and built another fishway, now the first time since colonial times, the alewife could swim all the way up to the source with the breeding grounds. This is another annual paddle that we do actually more than once a year, Newport, and it's a great paddle. We put in at Beaver Tail or in Jamestown, and then the only challenge, not the only, but the biggest challenge there is crossing Narragansett Bay, and we oftentimes do it on a Sunday afternoon, so it gets kind of crowded with yachts and cruise ships and barges and whatnot. So you have to kind of pick your way across, but it's a great paddle. Hudson River is another wonderful. I think I've probably paddled on most of the rivers in the Northeast, most of the big rivers. Hudson, I've done it a couple of times. We did it all the way from Rouse's Point, which is on the Canadian border in Vermont, and then followed it down to Statue of Liberty. So it's a couple hundred miles. Anybody know about the Northern Forest Canoe Trail?
I heard about it.
Yeah, there's a 700-mile corridor that's maintained by this organization. It's a great organization. You can do it in segments. I've done nowhere near half of it, or so, probably 200 or 300 miles of it or so at different times. But this is one of my favorite spots up in Rangeley, Maine. And we were there. We were camping along the way. We go for maybe 3 or 4 days, or 5 or 6. And there's great camping spots. The organization, you can buy the map or get a map, and there's all kinds of support that where it tells you where to camp and where you can pick up supplies and stuff. The Essex River is another nice river. They have a race there every year. That's in Massachusetts. This was interesting when my son and I were hiking, we were canoeing on the boundary waters in Minnesota. I was looking at maps and I noticed the farther east you go, you see all kinds of other lakes. And I saw this one is way farther east in Quebec. And I said, what is that? And it turned out it's called Manicouagan. And it's an annular lake. It was formed by an asteroid that slammed into Earth about 200 million years ago. And it created this perfect donut hole. And I said, I wonder if you can paddle on that. And so I saw this road, that white line on the right side there, going up. And sure enough, there was a road and there was an access there. And so I organized an expedition. There were 4 of us in 2 tandem canoes, and we put in, and it's 125 miles around. But it was a great trip. People said, oh, you can't do it, it's gonna take you a month, and so forth. It took us almost a little under 5 days to do it, but it was great. It was challenging, because it's 6 miles wide across. We wanted to get to the inner side, but it was really kind of perilous. There were huge seas and a lot of pitch coming off those wide open areas. So it was a good trip. It wasn't all bad. I mean, this was one of the calm days towards the end, and that we didn't see a soul the whole time we were out there. Lake Champlain is another. When I said Rouse's Point, I meant to say Lake Champlain, not the Hudson River. I did the Lake Champlain as part of the Hudson River. I've done it a couple of times, both north to south and south to north. It's 90 miles long. And if you do it, I mean, you can do it on little day hikes, day paddles here or there. I would advocate going on the New York side because it has better campgrounds. And I usually try to abide by most of the signs, but sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. But in this case, I think we just used a little bit of discretion. We didn't trespass. And nothing tastes better than food outside, of course. This is in my backyard. And that's it.
All right.
Very nice.
So tell me about some of the places that you'd like to hike, or any questions, any suggestions. I'm always looking for new places to hike. Yes?
I just want to point out the lighthouse down at Watch Hill. You can go there. So like a 1-lane road. It's now, I did it a few weeks ago. And you can park out there. And it's
Oh, yeah.
a beautiful vista.
It is. It is. You can make that as part of the Napa Tree or the Watch Hill hike.
Right, exactly.
They say no cars, but I guess maybe they don't enforce it. But it's nice if
I
you.
think in the summer.
Yeah, the
In
summer
the
maybe
summer,
they
no cars, but I think in the winter and fall, like when it's basically shut down for the winter, you
Yeah.
can go down there.
You're right. It is one of the most spectacular vistas.
Yeah.
You get to see 3 states, and it's terrific. That's a good suggestion. So if you have any thoughts, take one of my cards, shoot me an email, and like David, who's sitting right here, he was telling me about having the walking around Wyasset Lake, and I said I didn't realize that. So he escorted me out. We had a nice hike across the ice.
Well, I'm going to invite Stephen to go to the book table if anyone would like to ask him questions. Books are for sale at the front. You can also use your card with us. So whatever you guys like to do. All right? Thank you. And I'm sure he'll sign it for you if you want.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
Stephen.
you.
You're one of the best resources in the
Oh,
area.
I appreciate
Steve
that.
Fagin.
Well, I rely on a lot of people